Salve a tutti, sono Almarok e benvenuti in un nuovo video. Oggi siamo qui per fare un'intervista a Benjamin Ryan, famoso per essere stato tastierista e cofondatore dei Cradle of Filth. Prima di iniziare ringrazio Benjamin per la sua grande disponibilità, per aver accettato di essere nostro ospite, vi lascio l'intervista e vi auguro buona visione. I'm Almarok, I'm here with Benjamin Ryan, former Cradle of Filth. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, man.
Why you started to do music and why you started to do metal music? Talk me about the start of your career.
I mean, I've been into music for as long as I can remember, to be honest. Like, you know, my parents were into cool music like prog rock and stuff. I remember listening to Mike Oldfield, Tubular Bells, and like Pink Floyd, and with Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds, and Yes, and all, you know, all that cool old 70s prog rock stuff, you know. And I'd just always been into music, and my mum was into like a few heavier things. She was always into the Rolling Stones. She was into Meatloaf and things like that. So I've always been exposed to all sorts of kind of cool rock music. And I was playing synthesizers. You know, I was interested in like synth music, Jean-Michel Jarre, and I loved all the Rick Wakeman, you know, Yes, and all the prog rock keyboard players and all that kind of stuff. And my brother Paul was he was always more into the heavier stuff, you know. He introduced me to Iron Maiden and Slayer and all of that kind of stuff. He was like my big brother who was into all this cool heavy metal, you know. And so him and Dan started a band, and we'd jammed together for years, you know. We'd sort of been, you know, playing silly songs and stuff together, but him and Dan started a band. And they wanted someone to play gothic-y keyboards on it, and I'm like, yeah, fuck yeah, I'll do that. That's cool. So that was it, really. Like, you know, I'd played in a couple of school bands, and, you know, sort of done a few sort of local gigs and stuff. But that was, you know, when it seriously started happening was when I started playing with Dan and Paul, you know.
You and your brother Paul are two of the founding members of Cradle of Filth. You can talk me about that period, the foundation of the band, and you have worked at the first Cradle of Filth album, Principle of Evil Made Flesh.
Yeah.
He is considered the starting of vampiric black metal. How was born the idea to combine black metal with your orchestration, because you are the keyboardist? So
yeah,
with your personal orchestration and about the foundation of this style of music.
Well, you know, as I sort of alluded to before, you know, it was our school band, you know, like Dan. My brother's like 2 years older than me, or 18, you know, nearly 2 years older than me. And Dan was in like the year above him at school. And, you know, we all sort of were into the same music. We all knew all the same people. And we, you know, like school band scenes, you know, it's a bit incestuous. Everyone plays in everyone else's bands and everyone supports everyone else and all that. So we all knew each other and all sort of played with each other, you know. And like Paul was always into all the hardcore stuff and all the thrash stuff, and, you know, Anthrax and Slayer and Metallica, and, you know, like all the way through to like heavier, you know, arguably heavier stuff, Napalm Death and, you know, Death and, you know, bands like that. And we were all like, me and Dan and the others, we were all into that stuff as well. But Paul, that was really where Paul was at. He loves all that stuff. Dan was always into the more gothic sort of, you know, like the literature side of things, you know, like, you know, H.P. Lovecraft and like the Satanic Bible was a book that Dan, I remember sitting down with Dan and having a look at the Satanic Bible for the first time. Dan showed it to me, and I'm like, oh, this is fucking cool, you know. So and we sort of, me and Dan got chatting about what sorts of music we're into. We were both into Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds, so we played that incessantly on tour and, you know, in the studio in between, you know, recording and stuff like that. But we also like introduced, and I can't remember what stuff I introduced him to and what stuff he introduced me to, but we were both into like Danny Elfman soundtracks, you know, and the Dracula, Francis Ford Coppola Dracula film. That soundtrack's fucking amazing, you know. So we got into loads of this cool sort of gothic, you know, fantasy music and you know, as well as like the original classical stuff like Holst's Planets, you know, like amazing stuff, you know, and like Wagner, you know, like the Ring Cycle, you know. So we were listening to all this cool sort of dark, heavy gothic music. And I think it was, you know, very much like we were all pulling in different directions, you know, different people that joined the band. We were all pulling in different directions with our influences, but we all got what each other was doing, you know. We all sort of respected what each other was doing and where we were coming from. I was into loads of like synthy music, and you know, I liked the idea that you could play with reality. You could play with the idea that you were synthesizing strings, and you weren't trying, you know, you're not trying to pretend that you really had an orchestra there, but can you replicate something so well that no one knows, and if they don't know, does it really matter, you know? And playing with these sort of ideas of reality, and I think that sort of tied in with a lot of what Dan was interested in, of blending like you know, fantasy stuff and philosophical stuff, religious stuff, I suppose, you know, is kind of, so it all sort of came from those sort of different influences, I guess, you know. And the black metal scene in Norway started taking off. We were doing this stuff, and we were into like some of the older black metal bands like Celtic Frost, Bathory, Venom, and all that. But the Norwegian scene was sort of starting to take off, and we were hearing these bands. You know, these bands are doing some fucking cool stuff as well, you know. So yeah, so that was it really. Like you know, and we had the good fortune to make contact with some of these people. We toured with Emperor, and you know, played with you know, various sort of other, you know, like Scandinavia, At the Gates, you know, that fantastic band At the Gates, you know.
Filth are considered not just a symphonic black metal band, but a vampiric black metal band. And
yeah.
Yeah, how was difficult for you do that part at K-Bird for the album?
I don't. I mean, it's difficult to say, because I never really found it difficult. If that makes sense. It was me and my friends having some fun and making some art and enjoying, you know, the fantasy side of it, like seeing what we could do, you know. And once we'd got the idea, the idea of being like a gothic band, vampiric black metal, whatever you want to call it, you know, the idea of that sort of imagery and bringing it in from all directions, you know, whether it was from the metal scene and from the gore bands and things like that, or whether it was Hammer House of Horror or Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, was a massive influence, like image wise, as well as the music that goes with that film, but you know, the imagery that came from that film. And sort of it never felt difficult. It was hard work. We all worked really, really hard, and we worked long hours and spent a lot of time doing it, but it was always fun. It was always enjoyable, and it was always you know, it was what we wanted to do. So there was no, you know, it never felt like a chore, you know.
And why you decided to leave after the first album of Cradle, and after Cradle of Filth, how has continued your career?
The why is a very controversial and long-winded story, and this many years after, I think it's best to summarize it by saying, you know, we were just a bunch of kids that ended up getting, you know, far more success than we knew what to do with, and we, you know, fell out, and it became politics, and it became bullshit, and we all, you know, believed our own hype and ended up falling out over nonsense, you know. So I think that's it's a massive oversimplification, but I think that's it. Outside influences got involved when it was just us, you know, when it was the original group of people. We all got on like a house on fire. There was no politics, there was no bullshit, there was no nothing like that. But gradually, as the band got bigger, more and more outside people started becoming involved, and it brought more and more chaos, and it brought more and more different divisive kind of ideas into what was going on. And it was, you know, it's just one of them things, you know. Shame, but it's how it worked. So yeah, as far as my career since then, me and my brother Paul and Paul Allender formed a new group, the Blood Divine, and we toured that for a while and put a couple of albums out, and you know, that was really cool. And sort of had some interesting fun touring Europe, and you know, doing the rock and roll thing. And it got to a point, and I'm looking back 20 years now, so I'm kind of, you know, having to sift through my memory as to what was going on, you know. But it just, whereas Cradle never seemed like a chore, it started, and I suppose Blood Divine never really seemed like a chore, but the politics were there by that point. The money was involved, and the people were involved, and it was never, it was never just a bunch of school friends doing some cool stuff, and it just became a job, and I just got fed up of it, to be honest, and I played in a couple of other bands, and I played in a cool band with the guy who was the guitar tech for Cradle of Filth at one point, a guy called Rishi Mehta. Fantastic bloke, amazing guitarist, and I played in a band with Rishi for a while, and that was cool. So did some more musical stuff, but I just got fed up with it, really, and took a very long break from doing that kind of stuff, during which time I've been involved in I've run a couple of companies, I've been involved in video production, I've been involved in audio production. I was a sound engineer, like live front of house sound engineer at a couple of venues for different times. So I've just done all sorts of different stuff until about, I suppose, just over 10 years ago, nearly 15 years ago, I started getting interested in hypnosis. Total left field, total different thing. So I learned how to do hypnosis and became a hypnotherapist. So I've been doing that really like ever since, until the pandemic hit. And I've always sort of carried on being interested in music and making stuff, but only for me, like just making little bits of music that have gone on videos that I've made, or whatever, just fun stuff, or playing guitar for my kids, like playing silly songs with my children, And the pandemic came along, and I just ended up with time on my hands and sat in front of a computer thinking, well, I'm just going to make some more music and see what happens. So yeah, I kind of got back into it, kind of fallen back into it, didn't intend to. And I kind of, during that period, I made the decision that I was only going to do it for as long as it was still fun. Because I was, when I stopped doing it before, I got so fucked off with it all. I was just like, I just can't be bothered even, like I say, I played in a couple of bands, but very quickly playing. And it wasn't anything to do with the bands. It was me, I didn't enjoy it. I was just like, it was a chore, So I decided that basically I'm going to do this for as long as I enjoy it. If I keep enjoying it, I'll keep doing it. And if I stop enjoying it, I'll stop doing it. And that's where I'm at the moment, still enjoying it. And I've got I put a single out last year, and I've got an EP ready to go, and I've got an album ready to go, which they're sort of they were ready to go at the end of last year, really, but there's been a couple of delays and things like that. And I'm just not pressuring myself about it. They'll come out when they come out, but the EP will be the next thing. I've got like a 3-track EP, which is one of the tracks from the album. It's a slightly different mix of it, and then there's like an extended ambient version of it. It's a much more whereas the single's quite poppy in a way, which is kind of weird to say. Like it's kind of there's like choruses and melodies and things like that, stuff that I'm not known for really. But the EP is a lot more ambient, and there's a track, a pretty ambient track from the album, but there's also a very long extended, I think it's like 12-minute version of it or something like that, which is sort of long and very slow. And then there's another track from the album, but it's not the album version, it's another long ambient version of the album track. So hopefully that will come out in the next few months. If I get round to it, if I get and make everything line up and find the time to do it. And then once that's done, there's an album, like a 11-track full album. That's again, all the music's done. It's just a matter of putting it all together, putting it on a platform, mastering it all, getting it out there. So that's where I'm at with it all, really.
This can be a difficult question, but
okay.
If you want to be remembered for an album in your career, which is?
That is a difficult question. I mean, I always remembered, like the very first album that I was involved in, because Cradle made like another album before Principle of Evil Made Flesh. I don't know if you know about the Goetia or Goetia, and it's lost. It got deleted. I mean, it's the record company it was supposed to come out on. They basically tried to, as I understand it, looking back 30 years and, through the eyes of a kid as I was at the time, it seemed like the record company tried to screw the studio out of their fee, and the studio kept hold of the tapes, and the record company disappeared. And eventually the studio said, well, this was before Principle came out and we started making some money. The studio said, all right, well, we need the tape. So they wiped over it and recorded over it. But while we were recording that, I always remember someone saying to me, you know, you're only ever as good as the last album you put out, you know, so you've always got to try, you know, and you know, it's always kind of stuck with me. So I guess I have to stick with that and say, like, you know, the one that's about to come out, because I'm really pleased with it. I'm like, you know, it's very cool. I'm very happy with it. But I'm pleased with all of them. I haven't done an album, I haven't been involved in an album that I look back on and cringe, you know. There's the odd track I listen to and think, oh yeah, could do that better. The production was a bit shit, or, you know, there was mistakes in the performance, or so there's the odd thing here and there. But broadly speaking, I'm really happy with all of it, you know. It like the original recording of Dusk and Her Embrace, which came out as Dusk and Her Embrace Original Sin, which was recorded before we left the band. I was really proud of that, and I was really sad for a long time that never saw the light of day. So I'm really pleased that that's out there now. You know, that's a really good, solid piece of work. You know, I'm really really proud of it. You know, but I'm proud of that for different reasons than Principle or the Blood Divine albums. You know, so, and I think they've all got something about them. They're all a moment of creativity where I was at the time, where other people I was working with were at the time. So sorry to be vague about it, but yeah, I guess there isn't one. They're just, you know, whatever you listen to at the time, if you like it, then, you know, good. I think as much as anything, I'm somewhat amazed that 30 years ago Principle came out, and I'm amazed that this thing that me and my mates worked on 30 years ago, people are still going, yeah, that's pretty cool, isn't it? You know, I want to listen to that. That's anything past that is a bonus, you know. There's just the fact that people are still interested is fucking brilliant, you know.
In your opinion, how many things have changed in black metal scene when you started from nowadays? And if you have an advice for who want to be a musician nowadays?
That's a difficult one. Everything's changed, you know. The whole world has changed, you know, not just music, but when Principle came out, there was no internet, you know. I mean, there was an internet, but we didn't use it. We didn't know what it was, you know. I remember a conversation around the time of Principle coming out. I might be getting my dates wrong, but it was around the time of Principle coming out where someone explained to me what the internet was, and I was like, that sounds fucking cool, and went around my friend's house and looked at the web, and I was like, wow, that's, you know, that's a cool thing. So, you know, it's like it's just a different world. And we recorded, you know, I used the word tape about, you know, the first album, the Goetia that we recorded, the tapes got wiped over. Well, there are no tapes now, unless someone's an enthusiast and, you know, wants to use tape because they like it, which I can see why, because it's, you know, it's a cool way to record. But so yeah, so I don't know. I can't, you know, someone coming up in today's world, you know, be true to yourself, you know, do what you want to do, and, you know, make stuff you want to make, and work hard, and, you know, don't be told what you should or shouldn't do. I think, like, that's another thing that always came out of it. I always remember back to when, like, before we made any sales, before we were a signed band, before all that, all the people at our school going, you know, like, there was you know, pop bands or rock bands or whatever, much more commercial stuff, looking at what we were doing and going, that's a load of fucking old noise, you're never going to get anywhere doing that shit, you know. And we loved it. We were really into it, and we liked what we were doing, and we were like, well, you know, I don't care, you know, we're doing it because we want to do it, not because we want to impress you, you know. And here we are 30 years later discussing the album that came off the back of all that work when we were teenagers, you know. So do what you want to do and mean it, I suppose. I don't know.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
You're very welcome, man. Nice to speak to you. Nice to meet you. And thanks for being interested, you know. Thanks for taking the time, you know.
Thank you. Thank
Cheers,
you.
man.
Cheers,
See you
man.
later. Bye.